I once believed she was family. She called me mom, cared for me for 10 years. But then I found out the European vacation she planned for us was really a one-way trip to a foreign nursing home. No family, no ID, no way back. And before that, she used my name to take out nearly $1 million in loans. I'm not just some old woman anymore. I'm the last name on the page and the one who flipped the game. If you think this is just another family story, you're dead wrong. Hit subscribe now to catch more episodes full of betrayal, twists, and truth. The wind came in steady from the Pacific that morning, carrying with it the scent of wet salt and pine. Waves crashed lazily against the rocks below, and the old wooden siding of Lucinda Hart's seaside home groaned in rhythm like it had for years. She had woken early, as she always did, before the gulls started screaming, before the fishermen pulled out of the cove and padded barefoot into the kitchen, letting the cold floor remind her that she was still alive. The kettle hissed. She poured her coffee black and steady and stepped onto the porch in her wool cardigan and faded robe. Her house stood quiet behind her, creaking in its age, much like her. There were photos on the fireplace mantel, dusty and still, her late husband Leonard smiling in sepia, a much younger Lucinda beside him in a red sweater, and one recent picture of Eliza, her niece, or rather the daughter of a cousin who had vanished years ago, smiling in front of a law school banner, eyes proud and sharp. Eliza, the only one left who called her Aunt Lou, the only one who came by now. Brought groceries, helped with her online banking, made her feel less like a ghost. Lucinda sat down with her cup and looked out over the sea. This was her routine, her quiet, her little kingdom. She heard the mail truck crunch up the gravel just after 8. She didn't usually bother checking right away. Most days it was credit card offers, catalogs, or sympathy cards from the church with pre-printed blessings, an empty space where a name should be. But something about today, it was the weight of the wind maybe, or the way the gulls were circling differently, made her stand. She walked to the box at the end of the drive, reached in. There was a single envelope, not the cheap kind, not a catalog. It was thick, formal. The return address typed in stark sans-serif letters, United States District Court, Oregon Division. Her stomach tightened. Inside, the air changed. She shut the door behind her and peeled the envelope open with careful, dry fingers. She didn't even make it past the first sentence. To Ms. Lucinda Hart, you are hereby summoned to appear before the court in the matter of United States versus Hollow Creek Realty Holdings, Inc., wherein you are identified as the sole listed owner and principal operator. Lucinda froze. She blinked. She read it again. Owner, principal operator. It went on to explain that the company Hollow Creek Realty Holdings was currently under investigation for laundering millions of dollars through fake property transactions in Oregon, Nevada, and abroad. The name Lucinda Hart appeared on all documentation. The IRS was involved. There were federal auditors, a court date, a list of potential charges. She sank into the old dining chair by the window and stared at the letter for a long time. A coldness pressed against the back of her spine, moving up into her neck like ice water. Her hands began to shake. No, this was a mistake. She wasn't in real estate. She hadn't signed anything. She didn't even know what a holding company did. Lucinda Hart had spent her life teaching 5th grade in a public school outside Tillamook. Her biggest financial decision in the last year had been whether or not to renew her subscription to Reader's Digest. She paid for everything in cash, or with the debit card Eliza had helped her set up. She wasn't a criminal, she was a widow. Her heart pounded. The room felt too small. She reached for the phone. Eliza answered on the 3rd ring. Hey, Aunt Lou. I was just about to call you. I'm picking up groceries after my shift. I thought I'd swing by. Eliza. Lucinda's voice was dry. She tried to steady it. I just got a letter from the government. Silence. It says I'm the owner of something called Hollow Creek Realty Holdings. It says I'm being summoned to federal court over money laundering. Her voice cracked on the last 2 words. Another pause. What Eliza's tone shifted instantly from cheerful to something sharper. Wait, what are you talking about? Lucinda read the first lines aloud, her voice trembling. She heard rustling on the other end of the line, then the sound of Eliza moving fast. "Oh my God," Eliza said. "That's insane. You're obviously not Aunt Lou. You're not involved in anything like that. This has to be some kind of mistake." Lucinda was silent. "I mean Jesus," Eliza continued. "Are you sure it's not one of those scams? You know, the kind where they send out fake letters to scare old people?" "It looks real," Lucinda whispered. "It has a court date. My name's all over it." "Okay," Eliza said firmly. "Don't panic. I'll be there in 30 minutes. We'll figure this out, okay? Don't talk to anyone else. Just wait for me." Lucinda nodded, though there was no one to see. "Okay." But her hands were still shaking. As she hung up, she looked down at the papers again. Her name, her full name typed in bold black ink. Not once. Dozens of times. Her address, her signature. Except it wasn't hers. She had no memory of signing anything. Her chest tightened. She reached for her coffee. It had gone cold. Was this what it felt like, she thought, to fall out of your own life? One moment you're sitting in your kitchen thinking about how much to water your begonias, and the next you're a criminal on paper. She looked out the window. The ocean still moved ignorant and unconcerned. She whispered aloud to no one, "What the hell is happening?" And then, as if her own voice had startled something inside her, she heard another whisper, fainter but crueler. "You trusted her." Lucinda stood slowly, gripping the edge of the table for support. Her house, once a place of warmth and quiet dignity, now felt alien. The clock on the wall ticked with new menace. The photographs on the mantel looked down at her with judgment, or maybe pity. And in the corner, the framed picture of Eliza smiling in her graduation gown seemed to have shifted ever so slightly, like the angle of a lie becoming visible once you know it's a lie. Lucinda swallowed hard. She looked down again at the words in her hands. "You are hereby summoned," she said in a low voice that shook at first, then steadied. "I don't know what you did, Eliza, but if you dragged me into this, I swear to God I will drag you out with me." And then, barely above a whisper as her eyes narrowed, "I may be old, but I'm not stupid." The ocean roared outside, and inside a storm was beginning. The courthouse was built in the 1940s, a long block of granite and gray steel perched over downtown like a judge's scowl frozen in stone. Lucinda Hart stood at the top of its wide concrete steps, her coat buttoned too high, hands clenched around her purse strap like it could hold her upright. The sky above was the color of old newspaper, and the gulls circling overhead seemed to echo the sound of her heart, rapid, nervous, unsettled. She hadn't been to court since she served jury duty 27 years ago. Back then, she remembered admiring the quiet authority of the room, the way everyone stood a little straighter when the judge walked in. It had felt orderly, civilized. Now, as she stepped inside, all she felt was small. A clerk led her through security and down a hall that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and bureaucracy. The walls bore faded posters about fraud prevention, victim support services, and financial crimes against the elderly. The irony did not escape her. She was ushered into a room that felt like a waiting area for purgatory white walls. Too many chairs, no windows. Sitting at the far end of the table was a woman in a dark blue suit with the posture of someone used to being feared or obeyed. She rose when Lucinda entered. "Mrs. Hart," she said, extending a firm hand. "I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney Deborah Mendez. Thank you for coming in voluntarily." Lucinda shook the hand. "I wasn't aware I had a choice." Mendez allowed herself a flicker of a smile. "You'd be surprised how many people pretend they never got the letter." Lucinda sat, her knees cracking as she did. She didn't want coffee. She didn't want small talk. She wanted answers. Mendez slid a folder across the table. Inside were color printouts, spreadsheets, images of contracts, and a series of government seals that made Lucinda feel like she was holding state secrets. Hollow Creek Realty Holdings was incorporated 14 months ago, Mendez began. Its listed business is luxury property development and overseas investment acquisitions. Lucinda blinked. "I don't know what any of that means." "That's fine," Mendez replied, not unkindly. "What matters is that over the last year, Hollow Creek has moved roughly $4.8 million through various shell companies. These transactions occurred across 4 states and involved properties that either don't exist or were grossly inflated in value." Lucinda felt like she was listening to a foreign language. I didn't start a company. I don't even know what a shell company is. Mendez opened another folder and turned it around. There, in black ink and crisp margins, was a notarized article of incorporation bearing Lucinda Hart's name, her signature, her social security number, a scanned copy of her driver's license. Lucinda stared. Her eyes scanned the signature. It was slanted just like hers. The S in Lucinda curled the way she did when she was in a hurry. The address listed was hers. Everything matched. "This isn't real," she said softly. "I didn't sign this." Mendez leaned forward. "We have no reason to doubt the documentation yet. All filings were completed properly. All forms passed identity verification checks. But I believe you, Mrs. Hart. You don't strike me as the international laundering type." Lucinda looked up. "So, I'm not under arrest?" "Not yet," Mendez said. "That depends on whether we determine you were complicit or a victim." Lucinda's breath caught. Victim, identity theft. It happens more than people think, especially to the elderly. We're pursuing multiple leads, but every time we pull at the thread, it leads back to this name, yours. Lucinda sat back in the chair, heart drumming a warning inside her chest. She didn't feel like a criminal, but she didn't feel like a victim either. She felt used. "Who filed the papers?" she asked. Mendez glanced at her notes. The documents were filed electronically through a third-party registration service. The IP address was masked, but we're working on tracing it. Lucinda's mind raced. Someone had used her name, her identity, to create this thing, this phantom company now sinking in federal suspicion. "I have to ask," Mendez said. "Is there anyone in your life who might have had access to your personal information, tax returns, ID past addresses?" Lucinda opened her mouth and hesitated. "Eliza. No. No, not her. Not sweet Eliza, who brought groceries and adjusted her Wi-Fi router, who always picked up her calls, who helped file her taxes when TurboTax got too confusing. Eliza knew everything about her. Of course she did. She must have helped someone else by accident, Lucinda thought. Or maybe she was tricked. Maybe. "Are you okay?" Mendez asked, watching her. Lucinda nodded slowly. I'm trying to remember if I've ever misplaced anything." A deflection. But she wasn't ready to say the name out loud. Not yet. Saying it would mean admitting a fracture. The meeting ended with promises of follow-up and reassurances that her cooperation would be taken into account. She left the courthouse with a stack of photocopies in her handbag and a sense that her life had tilted sideways. That night, the walls of her cottage seemed too close, the silence too loud. The next morning, Lucinda walked the trail down to the local diner, more out of habit than hunger. Marla, her neighbor of 30 years, was already seated in the corner booth, stirring sugar into her tea. "Lucinda," she called, "you're up early? Sit." Lucinda slid into the booth, grateful for the normalcy. "You okay?" Marla asked. "You look like you saw a ghost." Lucinda hesitated. She didn't want to spill her soul over scrambled eggs. "I just got summoned to court," she said eventually, trying to sound amused. "Something about a company I supposedly own. Big mix-up." Marla's eyes widened. "A company? Hollow Creek Realty or something." Marla paused. "You know, now that you mention it, I did see Eliza with some papers a while back. Thick folder. She said it was some form you asked her to print." Lucinda looked up, heart skipping. "When was this?" "Oh, must have been a couple months ago. She was sitting on your porch flipping through them. I was walking my dog, remember?" Lucinda didn't remember, but now she wanted to scream. "And you're sure it had my name on it? I caught a glimpse. Might have been a tax form. It said Hart in bold on the top. Could have been yours." "Thought nothing of it." Lucinda forced a smile. "Yeah, probably taxes." But inside her blood was cold. She went home, pulled open the drawer where she kept her papers. She leafed through her own returns. Everything looked untouched. Nothing missing. Except the copy of her 2018 return wasn't there. Eliza had helped file that year, said she'd keep the paperwork together in her secure folder on her laptop. Lucinda suddenly couldn't breathe. She sat down slowly, her knees buckling. Was it possible? Eliza had her tax returns, her social security number, access to her ID scans, all her online passwords. Lucinda had trusted her with everything. She wanted to call her, to ask plainly what the hell was going on, but she didn't. Instead, She sat there in the quiet hum of her house and remembered something Eliza had said just last spring over tea watching waves crash onto the shore. "You know, Aunt Lou, Eliza had said not unkindly, your name has such a dignity to it. It's a name people respect. It carries weight." Lucinda had chuckled, then thinking it was a compliment. Now that sentence hit different. It felt like a motive. She stared down at her own hands resting still on the tabletop. Eliza wouldn't. She couldn't. Could she? Outside, the wind began to rise again, and in the rising cold, Lucinda sat in her chair and finally allowed herself to feel something she hadn't let in since her husband passed away. Doubt. Lucinda Hart sat at the kitchen table with a manila folder spread open like a crime scene. Around her, the quiet clink of old spoons in the drawer, the low hum of the fridge, the faint creak of her own breathing. The air in the house felt heavier since the courthouse. She hadn't touched the TV in days. Every light switch she flicked seemed to click louder, like the house knew something she didn't. It had been 3 nights since Marla mentioned the folder Eliza was carrying. 3 nights since Lucinda had stared into the mirror, wondering what parts of her life she had handed over too easily. What passwords, what numbers, what trust. Now she was digging. Receipts, tax stubs, insurance forms, envelopes faded by time and ink. Her filing system was not elegant, but she had always believed that if anything ever went wrong, she'd find what she needed here. And then she did. Buried in a dusty sleeve marked 2019, Maya C. She found a piece of mail. She didn't remember opening an envelope from First National Equity Holdings postmarked from Nevada, dated 15 months ago. Inside, a notice of loan approval. Lucinda's eyes flicked across the page. She didn't understand every term, secured lien adjustable rate balloon clause, but the numbers were unmistakable. Loan amount, $320,000. Collateral primary residence, 8425 Delancey Bluff Drive, Oregon. Her house. Her name was typed in bold, followed by a signature. Her signature, except it wasn't. It looked like her name. The letters had her rhythm, her familiar slant, but the pressure was wrong. The loop in the H was too tight. The cross on the T was too low. She would have noticed. She would have remembered. Lucinda sat back, eyes burning. A cold knot formed in her gut. She had never taken out a loan against her home. Ever. Leonard had paid it off 20 years ago. They made a pact, no debts after 60. They didn't have much, but they had peace, security. And now, apparently, someone had used her house as leverage to pull hundreds of thousands of dollars into a company she didn't even know existed. Her hands trembled as she reached for the phone. She didn't call Eliza. She wasn't ready, not until she had something more than suspicion. She called the number on the letter. A voicemail tree. She waited. Pressed 4. Waited again. Finally, a young voice answered. First National Holdings. This is Connor. How can I help? Yes, Lucinda said, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm calling about a loan. There's a document I received. It lists my name and my property, but I don't believe I ever. Can I get your loan number, ma'am? Lucinda read it. There was typing. Oh, Connor said after a beat. Your Hart. That's right. We show the loan as active. All payments current. Originated September 9th, 2023. Secured by residential property. Ownership confirmed via title deed and Social Security verification. Lucinda closed her eyes. Is there any way, she asked quietly, to see who made the payments? I'm afraid that information's restricted to the account holder. I am the account holder. Connor hesitated. Actually, ma'am, you're listed as the primary borrower, but the contact on file is an authorized party named Eliza Dane. The phone almost slipped from her hand. Lucinda thanked him, hung up, and sat motionless for nearly 5 minutes. Then she stood, walked to the porch, breathed air that didn't help. She needed someone who understood what this was. Someone who knew the system, not the legal system, not the banking jargon, but the shadows between them. The tricks, the tells, the methods of people who use trust like a weapon. That's when she remembered the name. Mason Clay. He used to live in the neighborhood. Retired detective. Old school gruff, once investigated a fraud ring in the county back when Lucinda was still teaching. He'd spoken once at a town hall warning seniors not to trust anyone with power of attorney. That night Leonard had whispered to her, I like him. He sounds like he's seen things. Lucinda walked to the community board by the library, where Mason still posted his handyman advice and odd jobs flyer. It had a phone number at the bottom, handwritten and underlined twice. She dialed. A gravelly voice answered. "Yeah. Is this Mason Clay?" "That's what my license says. Who's this?" "It's Lucinda Hart. I'm a neighbor from the coast." Pause. "Lucinda Hart. You taught at Tide Point Elementary." "That's right." "You still with us, Miss Hart?" "Thought maybe God had claimed the good ones already." Lucinda cracked a smile for the first time in days. "Not yet." "Well, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need to talk to someone who's not afraid of paperwork." They met at a small cafe off Highway 101. Mason was older than she remembered, white beard worn, jacket eyes like polished stone. He listened as she laid out the papers on the booth table, said nothing for a while, sipped his black coffee, looked over her forged signature like it was a familiar face. "You say your niece had access to your tax info?" he finally asked. "She helped me file it, said it was faster online. Did you ever sign anything for her to just drop off?" Lucinda nodded slowly. "A couple times. Groceries, package pickups. She said they wouldn't let her get them otherwise." Mason frowned. "Most people who do this don't need 100 documents. They only need 2, a full return with social and address. And trust." He pointed to the forged deed transfer. "This is professional work," he said. "She didn't do this at a Kinko's. Someone built this for her, someone who knows how to mask a paper trail." Lucinda looked down. "I don't want to believe it's her," she whispered. "Then don't," Mason said bluntly. "Just believe the paper." He reached into his worn satchel and pulled out a notepad. "I'm going to ask you for every document you've touched since 2022. Every call you don't remember making. Every favor she ran for you. Every email she opened just to check your spam. You give me that, and I'll give you something back." Lucinda looked up. "What?" "The truth, whether you want it or not." She nodded, and for the first time in weeks her spine straightened. They worked for hours. Every old letter, every file. Mason photographed them, marked key dates, circled inconsistencies. He made no judgments, only observations. "She used your signature from a scanned medical waiver," he said at one point. "Probably ran it through a signature generator. Changed the pressure pattern but kept the slope." Lucinda's stomach turned. By the end of the day she was exhausted. But underneath the fatigue, something deeper stirred clarity. Mason closed the folder. "She used you," he said flatly. "Whoever she is to you, she used you. Your house, your name, your past. And I'd bet my pension she's done it before." Lucinda stared out the window. "I raised her," she said softly. "She was 13 when her parents died. I took her in." "I know." "She called me Mama Lou till she was 20. "I know." "She said I was the only reason she graduated." Mason didn't reply, just waited. Lucinda turned to him. "Then why do I feel like she's the one handing me the rope?" Mason leaned forward. "Because sometimes," he said, "the ones closest to us don't climb the rope with us. They wrap it around our neck and call it love." Lucinda closed her eyes. Outside, the wind had picked up again. The sky darkened with incoming fog. Somewhere out there, the ocean still churned as if none of this mattered. But inside Lucinda Hart, something shifted. A fire. Not anger, not yet. Something more dangerous. Resolve. She opened her eyes and met Mason's. "Help me bring it down," she said. "I'm already in," he replied. "I've been bored for 5 years. Let's make someone nervous." They shook hands, and as they walked out together, Lucinda whispered under her breath, "I didn't know I was stepping into a storm, but now that I'm in it, I'll make damn sure I don't drown." 3 days into the investigation, Mason Clay had turned Lucinda's guest room into a war room. The dining table was buried in printouts, scribbled notes, and strings of colored tape connecting names to shell companies to post office boxes. Lucinda watched from the kitchen, coffee trembling in her hand, as Mason paced the room like a wolf mapping prey through snowfall. He wasn't loud, he wasn't theatrical, he was surgical. "She's smart," he said finally, stopping in front of a name scrawled in red ink, Greystone Equity Limited. "Too smart for 30, he added. Lucinda set her cup down. "What is that?" Front Mason replied. "Legal on the outside, hollow on the inside. I've seen it before. Usually used when someone wants to move money from one dirty pocket to another without leaving fingerprints." He held up a document. "Hollow Creek Realty registered in Oregon." Another. owned by Greystone Equity, registered in Delaware, and another, managed by a firm called Caldera Financial based in Nevada. Lucinda leaned forward. Nevada, Mason nodded. Where people go when they want to hide things in plain sight. Fewer regulations, fewer questions, especially in real estate. He spread the documents across the table like tarot cards. Eliza set this up months ago, he continued. Built it in layers. Shell companies masking shell companies. But she made one mistake. Same IP used to file both Hollow Creek and Greystone. Lucinda frowned. How do you know that? Mason gave a crooked smile. I still know people who owe me favors. He pulled out a printed email log. And guess whose university email address was used to verify the original EIN number for Greystone? He pointed to it. Eliza Dane at Portland Edu. Lucinda's breath caught. She said she never finished college, Lucinda whispered. Said the pressure got to her. That she left before graduation. She didn't just leave, Mason said. She was expelled. He flipped open a thin folder. Inside was a copy of a disciplinary record. It was short and brutal. Violation. Manipulation of financial aid records. Status scholarship revoked. Disciplinary action. Permanent expulsion. Lucinda stared at the words, her vision blurred. She told me. She just wanted to find herself, she said. She cried on my porch, said she didn't want to disappoint me. Mason paused, then asked gently, She ever ask you to co-sign anything after that? Lucinda nodded slowly. Said she was applying for a job and needed my address for stability. I thought I was helping. She made me feel like I was her only anchor. Mason exhaled through his nose. You were. He walked to the board. Now watch this. He drew a line. Eliza uses Greystone to create Hollow Creek. Hollow Creek borrows against your house. Hollow Creek then sends funds to Caldera Financial. He tapped the final name. Caldera's been flagged by the feds before known to push foreign cash through dead properties and convert it into crypto or overseas assets. Lucinda felt the room shift under her. You're saying she used me to launder money. I'm saying she used your life as a disguise, Mason said. She wore you like a mask. Lucinda turned away. The room was too bright. Her throat tight. I raised her. I know. She was a child when her parents died. I was the only one who took her in, and she learned everything from you. How to talk soft, how to be trusted, how to make people feel safe. Lucinda closed her eyes. She remembered Eliza as a teenager balancing textbooks on the porch, listening to jazz records, laughing at old movies. She remembered how fiercely Eliza clung to her during the funeral. You're all I have left, she'd whispered. Now it felt like the prelude to a long con. I should have seen it, Lucinda said, voice trembling. I should have known. Mason walked to her quiet. You saw what you needed to see. That's not weakness, that's love. Lucinda looked up, a flicker of defiance returning. Not anymore. Later that evening, Mason pulled an old laptop from his truck, sat cross-legged on the living room floor, booted into a secure shell and dug deeper. Lucinda stood behind him, arms crossed like watching over a wound. He hacked not illegally, just cleverly. Cross-referenced public records, skimmed data leaks, pieced together bits most would overlook. Then he found something. Eliza's name is attached to an old LLC out of Carson City, he said. Dissolved a year ago, but look at the board members. Lucinda leaned in. 3 names, all aliases, but one phone number was real. He traced it. Belonged to Randall Key, a known asset flipper once charged with international property fraud, but never convicted. Operated in Las Vegas, Toronto, and the Caymans. She's not alone, Mason said quietly. She's in deep. Lucinda said nothing. She just stared at the screen. And then in a small, shaken voice, she had me sign a birthday card for someone named Randy last year. I thought it was a friend. Mason turned. She was practicing, he said, normalizing the name, making it seem harmless. Lucinda's hands tightened around the edge of the chair. Everything now felt retroactive. Every smile, every story, every errand Eliza ran on her behalf, it all bent backward under the weight of this truth. She wasn't just betrayed. She was recruited. That night, Lucinda didn't sleep. She sat alone, flipping through old photos of Eliza, first day of high school, senior prom graduation that never happened. And there, in a faded picture from 2015, was a young woman who still needed her, who still looked small. Lucinda wanted to believe that girl was still in there somewhere. But the web Mason had uncovered didn't lie. This was deliberate, long planned, built with precision and patience. And worst of all, Lucinda had been chosen not because she was easy to fool, but because she was easy to forgive. That thought lodged deep, refused to leave. By morning she had made up her mind. They would not confront Eliza yet. Not without ironclad evidence, not without leverage. Mason agreed. She's careful, he said. You push too soon, she vanishes, and she won't vanish poor. Lucinda nodded. Then we don't push, she said. We follow the thread. Mason smiled. You're starting to think like a detective, Lucinda replied, cold and clear. No, I'm starting to think like someone who's tired of being used. Lucinda Hart had spent the last hour preparing her home, not for comfort, but for clarity. Every pillow fluffed, every lamp turned to just the right dimness, every trace of paper swept clean from the table. To Eliza, it would look like just another Tuesday evening visit from the aunt who always wore too much lavender and brewed tea in ceramic mugs from the 70s. But to Lucinda, tonight was theater. Mason was already in place, hidden in the attic crawl space above the living room, a voice recorder wired discreetly into the vent. He'd set it up that afternoon with the precision of a surgeon and the bitterness of a man who'd seen too many masks shatter too late. She'll deny it all he'd said before climbing up. Just let her talk. Lucinda had nodded once. Her eyes didn't blink much anymore. At 6:03 p.m. Eliza arrived. The same smile, the same faux cheerful, "Hi, Mama Lou," as she stepped inside with a tote bag of almond milk face wipes and guiltless ease. She hugged Lucinda tightly as if nothing had changed, as if there weren't cracks spreading invisibly through the floor beneath them. Lucinda hugged back. I made us chamomile, she said, calm as an undertaker. They sat in the living room. Sunset poured through the window like diluted gold. The ocean murmured just beyond the walls. Lucinda sipped her tea. Then casually, almost lazily, she said, Have you ever heard of Hollow Creek Realty? Eliza froze. It lasted less than a second, barely a twitch in the eye, a shift in her breath, but Lucinda caught it, saw it, logged it. Eliza tilted her head. Why? Lucinda shrugged. I got a letter. They said I own it. Eliza laughed lightly. Oh, that must be a mistake. Those registry databases are all over the place. You probably got mixed up in something from another Lucinda. There's not a lot of Lucinda Harts in Oregon, Lucinda replied, voice still steady. Eliza's fingers tightened slightly around her mug. Well, it's obviously just some clerical thing, probably a scam. Did they ask for money? Lucinda leaned back. No, the government asked for me. Silence. Listen, Eliza said, smiling too wide. I can look into it if you want. You shouldn't stress over this kind of thing. Lucinda tilted her head. You know, I was just thinking. Remember when you said you helped me with those tax forms? Was there anything I signed for you? Maybe something with company paperwork by mistake? Eliza blinked, then smiled again, warmer this time, almost maternal. Mama Lou, I would never do anything without asking you first. You know that. Lucinda smiled. Of course, it's just strange is all. Eliza looked down at her tea. Strange things happen all the time. It doesn't mean they're sinister. And then, like a magician redirecting attention, she changed the subject. Did you ever find that old record player we talked about? I was thinking we could go through your attic boxes this weekend. Lucinda nodded. Maybe. But the game had already shifted. Upstairs in the attic crawl space, Mason stared at the audio feed, eyes narrowing at the cadence of Eliza's voice. The deflections, the soft pivots, the excessive calm. He'd heard it all before from men who wore Rolexes to court and cried when the cuffs clicked. When Eliza left that night, she hugged Lucinda again. I'll come by Friday, she said. We'll do something fun. Lucinda smiled, looking forward to it. But as soon as the door clicked shut, Mason climbed down from the attic like a man pulling himself out of the underworld. She's good, he said, too good. He plugged the recorder into his laptop, scrubbed through the audio. At 6:07 p.m. he heard it. A pause, a breath, and then Eliza saying, Those registry databases are all over the place. You probably got mixed up in something from another Lucinda. Mason froze the waveform. That's the tell, he said. She framed the defense before you accused her. That's anticipation, not confusion. She knew. Lucinda stood behind him, arms folded. What else? Mason ran a filter-pulled metadata from the Wi-Fi signal Eliza's phone had automatically joined. Public IP, VPN. But one ping slipped through. Got you, he whispered. From the IP history, a remote login from Lucinda's own home Wi-Fi router 6 weeks ago connected to Caldera Financial in the Caribbean. "What's Caldera?" Lucinda asked. Mason didn't answer right away. He was typing. Then he pulled up an internal communications leak from a legal compliance audit scraped from a whistleblower site. Not illegal to view, not exactly clean either. He searched for Eliza Dane. There were dozens of documents, but one stood out. A redacted email dated 3 months earlier from Eliza to a recipient named Randall Key. It was short. "The last name holder is secured. Everything else is routed." Lucinda leaned over, eyes wide. "Last name holder." Mason nodded grimly. "You." She stared at the screen like it was a death certificate. "That's how they refer to me, not aunt, not family, just a name. She used your blood like a flag," Mason said. "You gave her cover. She gave you risk." Lucinda didn't speak for a long time. Then slowly she sat down and whispered, "I loved her like a daughter." Mason said nothing. "She called me Mama Lou. She called you a vessel." The silence in the room was heavy. Then Lucinda looked up, eyes hardening like winter glass. "She still thinks I don't know." Mason nodded. "So let's make sure when the mask comes off, she's the one looking in the mirror." Lucinda stood. "We'll need more than a recorder." "We'll get it." They met in the park just before dusk. Lucinda had chosen the spot carefully. Neutral ground, public but quiet. The kind of place where mothers pushed strollers and retirees fed ducks from brown paper bags. Tonight the air was heavy with early fog rolling off the sea. The benches glistened slightly from a light afternoon rain. She sat near the old stone fountain, hands clasped in her lap, trying to still their trembling. At 6:49 p.m. Eliza arrived. Her heels clicked sharply on the wet brick path. She wore a tailored coat and dark sunglasses, too much elegance for a simple walk in the park. Her lips were drawn in a thin, unreadable line. But when she saw Lucinda, she smiled, or tried to. "You sounded serious," she said, lowering her glasses. "Everything okay?" Lucinda didn't stand, didn't smile, just looked up, her voice calm, steady. "Sit down, Eliza." Eliza hesitated a second too long, then sat. Lucinda pulled a piece of paper from her coat pocket, folded once, crisp. "Do you recognize this?" She handed it to Eliza, who glanced at it, then laughed too fast, too loud. "Oh my God, Mama Lou, are we really still on this? What is it this time? Another fake letter? You can't keep letting this stuff get to you." Lucinda's tone sharpened. "It's an internal email. From you to Randall Key, dated 3 months ago. Refers to me as the last name holder. You said everything else was routed." Eliza blinked. For the briefest moment, she looked like a child caught in the hallway with chocolate on her hands. Then her expression shifted. "Flat, cold? Where'd you get that?" "Doesn't matter." Eliza's voice dropped a register. "It's out of context." Lucinda leaned forward, her voice cracking for the first time. "You used me, Eliza. My home, my identity, my life." Eliza scoffed. "I took care of you for 10 years. You turned me into a front. I fed you, drove you, paid your heating bills, with money laundered through my mortgage." Eliza stood. "You want to talk about betrayal? I gave you everything when no one else would even visit you." Lucinda stood, 2 eyes glassy. "I gave you a home. I gave you 10 years of my life," Eliza shouted. 10 years cleaning up your messes, making your appointments, keeping you company while your friends dropped dead one by one. What did I get? Grocery lists and guilt. You got my love? Lucinda's voice thundered louder than she knew she had left. And you burned it. Eliza's face twisted, not in regret, not in shame, but in raw, angry disappointment. You think love pays for student loans. You think love buys a future. Lucinda was quiet now. Her voice dropped hollow. I thought it did. Eliza turned, eyes flashing. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I used your name. Yes, I created companies. Because I had to. You think this world's made for people like us? I had nothing. You had a house, a history, a perfect credit score. You were just sitting on it. Lucinda's lips trembled. And you never asked. You would have said no. You never gave me the chance. The silence stretched. Birds shifted in the trees. A dog barked somewhere near the tennis courts. Eliza stepped back, her coat catching the wind like wings ready to flee. I don't owe you more than what I already gave. Lucinda didn't speak, just stared. And Eliza, perhaps expecting pleading, perhaps expecting a slap, got neither. Just stillness, and something far worse. Disappointment. Eliza took one last breath, shook her head, and walked away. Lucinda didn't follow, didn't call out. She just stood in the park, surrounded by leaves and wind heart cracking in quiet agony. And as the shadows lengthened and her knees threatened to give out, her voice, quiet, broken, narrated the moment. For no one. There are pains that don't bleed, but they tear through your heart just the same. It rained the morning they began the final leg of the plan. Not a storm, not a cleansing downpour, just that kind of gray drizzle that soaked everything in quiet unease. The kind that made Lucinda Hart wrap her cardigan twice around her and clutch her folders like a lifeline. Across the table in the quiet of Mason's small backroom office, the old detective clicked through emails and PDFs with surgical calm. "We've got what we need," he said, eyes scanning the screen. "You're still listed as principal shareholder of Hollow Creek Realty. But here, look." He turned the laptop toward her. Lucinda adjusted her glasses. There, on a scanned transfer agreement, was her name in bold, Lucinda A. Hart, authorized signatory. Lucinda stared at it, unblinking. "I never signed this." Mason nodded. "I ran it through 3 signature verification tools. Everyone confirms forged." He pulled a printed report from the desk drawer. "Compare it to the signature on your 2016 voter registration. See the loop in the L, the pressure point under the H. Real signatures don't change like that overnight." Lucinda's mouth tightened. "And the bank?" Mason reached into a folder and passed her a subpoena response. "We requested the transactional history from Caldera. Took some pressure, but got it. Wire transfers from Hollow Creek's primary account to Caribbean holdings in Belize and Antigua, both controlled by Eliza under aliases. One name shows up twice, Elena D. Harris. Same date of birth, same IP logs." Lucinda turned each page slowly, the weight of every number building like stones in her chest. Then she stopped at a wire transfer memo line. "Routing authorized by LH, compliance complete." "I never saw any of this," she whispered. "No," Mason said. "But you carried all of it." He opened another folder, court schedules, evidence lists, a CD marked audio, 312 recording. "She walked into your house," he said. "Spoke freely, lied comfortably. We have the voice match, the metadata, and the motive." Lucinda stared at the CD. "So we go to court." "We go to a preliminary hearing first," Mason clarified. "You'll present your evidence, and if the judge finds merit, they'll move forward with an official indictment or allow civil damages." Lucinda was quiet. "Then, what happens if I don't press charges?" Mason looked at her, surprised. "I mean it," she said. "What if I just let it go?" "You'd be legally exposed," he said. "She still has ownership leverage over assets in your name. She could move more money. Or worse, pin it back on you." Lucinda lowered her eyes. "I don't want revenge, Mason." "This isn't revenge. It feels like it." "No," he said, leaning forward. "Revenge is when you want someone to hurt. This is justice. And justice isn't about punishment, it's about limits. It's the line we draw so people don't cross again." Lucinda swallowed hard. "She called me Mama Lou for 10 years, and then called you the last name holder when the mask slipped." Lucinda looked away. "I raised her." "You did," Mason said. "And now you raise your hand in court. Not because you hate her, but because she needs to be stopped by someone who still believes in doing it the right way." Lucinda took a breath, then another. Outside, the rain had stopped. She looked back at the documents, at the voice recorder, at the judge's calendar circled in red ink. Then softly, "I want to face her, not bury her, not break her, just make her see what she did." Mason nodded. "Then let's build that mirror." The courthouse smelled of old wood and colder justice. Lucinda Hart walked through its revolving doors, not as a victim, not even quite as a plaintiff, but as a woman who had spent 70 years believing the world to be one thing and now was here to hold up what was left of her truth in the face of polished denial. The courtroom was clean and beige, the kind of neutral that hid bruises. At 9:03 a.m., Eliza entered. She was a silhouette of poise hair perfectly twisted into a chignon-tailored blazer, modest earrings. On her arm was a man in a gray Italian suit, Stephen R. Kessler, a known name in state legal circles. Calm, calculated, known for dismissing financial fraud charges like lint from a sleeve. Eliza didn't look at Lucinda. She didn't need to. They both knew the stakes. The judge, an older woman with reading glasses on a chain, took the bench. gavelled once. The bailiff called out names and the hearing began. Case 211B Hart versus Hollow Creek Holdings, LLC. Lucinda stood slowly. Mason, seated behind her, gave a tiny nod. In her hand were a thin file of evidence and the truth burning against her palm like a brand. Judge Harper cleared her throat. Ms. Hart, are you prepared to make your preliminary statement? Lucinda stepped forward. Her voice, though not loud, was precise. Yes, Your Honor. I wish to present myself not as a legal strategist or a business expert, but as someone who has been misused by family. There was a murmur. The gallery wasn't full, but the few legal interns and local reporters in the back leaned forward. I've been named as the primary owner of Hollow Creek Realty, she continued, but I had no knowledge of its creation, its operations, or the money it moved. What I do have are records, timelines, and proof. Judge Harper gestured. Please proceed. Lucinda opened the file, pulled out a flash drive. May I submit into evidence a recording made in my home on March 12th? It contains a conversation in which the defendant acknowledges knowledge of my name being used to shield operations. She refers to these events as handled and suggests she was the one taking care of me in exchange. The judge accepted the drive. A tech assistant plugged it into the courtroom audio system. The room filled with the voice of Eliza Dane. I took care of you for 10 years. What did I get? Grocery lists and guilt. A pause. Then, clear as glass, you had a house, a history, a perfect credit score. You were just sitting on it. Even Kessler twitched. The judge raised a brow. That's quite an admission. Lucinda wasn't finished. She stepped forward with 2 photos, handing them to the court clerk. Exhibit B, surveillance camera stills from March 5th, taken at First Federal Bank, Portland branch. They show Ms. Eliza Dane submitting corporate forms under the name of Hollow Creek Realty Documents, which list me as the authorized signatory. The images hit the overhead monitor. One frame, Eliza in a red coat, smiling politely at the clerk. Second frame, her hand holding a form with Lucinda's name. The gallery shifted again. Lucinda added voice level. At that time, I was at Mercy Hospital recovering from a minor cardiac procedure. I have the admission form here. I was under mild sedation. I couldn't have signed anything. She handed over the hospital record signed by a nurse, time-stamped to the hour. Even Kessler leaned in to glance at it. The judge looked up, her tone now sharper. Ms. Dane, do you dispute these documents? Eliza's expression flickered. I'd like to confer with my counsel. Kessler stood. Your Honor, in light of the new materials just introduced, we respectfully request a recess before providing a formal response. Judge Harper tapped her pen. This is a preliminary hearing, Counselor. Your client is not yet on trial, but the evidence is compelling. You'll have 15 minutes. Use them wisely. She banged the gavel once. Recess. In the hallway, Mason and Lucinda stood side by side. You hit hard, he said. I didn't come to tap. Inside the conference room, behind glass, Eliza paced like a caged animal, while her lawyer flipped through the photos, shaking his head. Gone was the poise, gone was the control. She didn't think I'd fight back, Lucinda murmured. No, Mason said. She thought you'd stay the mask, but you became the mirror. Lucinda watched Eliza press her hands to her forehead in frustration. Her voice just a whisper now. I don't need to win. I just need the truth to stand up in the daylight. The phone rang just after midnight. Lucinda had been lying in bed, wide awake, the ceiling above her, a blank ocean of questions. She didn't reach for the light, didn't hesitate. She knew it would be Eliza, the kind of call that comes when control slips out of reach. She answered on the second ring. Mama Lou, Eliza's voice was smaller now, not frightened, not furious, but naked. Lucinda didn't respond. Eliza exhaled shakily. I heard from Kessler. They think the case is going to be fast-tracked. He's talking about pre-settlements. Can we talk? Lucinda's silence filled the line like a weight. I never meant for this to go that far, Eliza said. It started small, just cleaning up some loans. Then it turned into covering expenses, then a company, then 2. But I swear I wasn't trying to hurt you. Lucinda's voice came quietly, calmly. You were trying to disappear me. Eliza paused. I didn't know what else to do. Lucinda stared out her window at the dark water beyond the dunes. You used my name. You took my home. You made me complicit in crimes I didn't even understand. I'm sorry. Eliza's voice cracked. I mean it. I'm willing to give everything back. The money, the properties, everything. I just need you to pull the complaint, please. I can't go to prison. Lucinda's eyes didn't blink. Are you sorry because you hurt me? Or because you got caught? A beat of silence. Both. Lucinda shook her head, the ache in her chest now colder than sharp. You had choices. I didn't. Eliza's voice rose. You don't understand. No one gives people like me second chances. I had to build them. I had to survive. And you did, Lucinda replied, by walking over me. There was another pause. Then softly, carefully, Lucinda continued. I found the letter, the one you printed and left in your travel folder, the one about the elder care assessment in Prague, the one where you used my name again. Eliza froze. What? You weren't taking me to Europe for a vacation, Eliza. You were going to leave me there, quietly, in a foreign care home, sign over my power of attorney and start over with my assets. New passport, new title, new continent. Mama Lou, no, that wasn't. Don't lie again, not now. Silence. Eliza finally broke. I panicked. Lucinda's voice didn't rise, it didn't shake, it didn't cry. You looked at the woman who raised you, who gave you a second chance at a life, and decided she was more useful forgotten. I was scared. You were selfish. The line went silent again, except for Eliza's breath, shallow, rapid, childlike. I loved you, she whispered. You loved what I gave you, Lucinda corrected. But you never loved me enough to stop taking. There it was, the final crack. I'm begging you, Eliza said. I'm begging you to make this go away. I will undo everything. Just don't let them lock me up, please. I'm still your Eliza. Still. Lucinda closed her eyes. No, you're not. She opened them again, saw her reflection in the window, a woman older, wiser, quieter now. You made your choices, she said softly. Now it's my turn. And she hung up. The gavel struck once, final, irrevocable. On the charges of financial fraud, falsifying legal documents, and identity manipulation, this court finds the defendant, Ms. Eliza Dane, guilty. A hush fell across the courtroom like a silk shroud. Eliza stood motionless beside her attorney, eyes cast downward, her once immaculate posture now slightly buckled. Her hands clutched each other in front of her waist, white-knuckled, but she didn't cry. Not anymore. Her face, for the first time in weeks, held something close to stillness. Not composure, not poise, shame. Judge Harper adjusted her glasses and turned her gaze toward Lucinda, seated calmly in the front row. A quiet strength radiated from the older woman. No satisfaction, no gloating, just presence, just resolve. Before we move to sentencing, the judge continued, Miss Hart, as the primary victim and plaintiff in this case, you have the opportunity to speak. Lucinda stood slowly. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She approached the lectern. No papers, no script, just her hands gently folded. Your Honor, she began, her voice steady. I never expected to stand in a courtroom like this, and certainly not with the person I once considered my daughter on the other side of the aisle. She looked over. Eliza did not meet her gaze. I've lived a long life. I've seen wars, funerals, marriages fall apart, and neighbors grow old and forget my name. But I never thought the deepest cut would come from someone I gave a second chance to. Her voice softened but grew firmer. Eliza stole my name, my credit, my peace. She made choices I can't begin to understand. And in doing so, she didn't just break the law, she broke something between us that can't be patched back together. Lucinda paused, breathing in slowly. But I'm not here to seek punishment, not in the traditional sense. A ripple of murmurs moved through the room. I ask this court not to imprison her, not today. I ask instead that her sentence be converted into a form of service, that she relinquish all the funds, properties, and assets she acquired during her fraudulent ventures, and use them to establish a fund, a trust. Judge Harper leaned forward, attentive. Lucinda continued, a foundation titled the Last Name Fund, dedicated to supporting elderly individuals who've been financially abused by their caregivers, families, or systems meant to protect them. She turned slightly now, not to the judge, but to Eliza. That is how you can atone, not through years behind walls, but through years of knowing that every dollar you manipulated will now help those who were silenced, who were tricked, who were me. Eliza slowly looked up. Her eyes glistened, but she held them open. She didn't argue, didn't flinch. For once she listened. Judge Harper sat in thought, then nodded slowly. This court has no precedent for such a request, but discretion is mine. I will honor Ms. Hart's motion. The defendant will forfeit all disputed assets to a state-supervised fund managed independently. Oversight will be handled through Oregon's Office of Elder Justice. Court supervision will remain active for 5 years. A beat. Eliza Dane. Do you accept these conditions? The room watched as Eliza, with a breath that came out more like a quiet sob, nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice cracked, barely audible. Lucinda didn't look away. Eliza glanced back once her face no longer polished her eyes, no longer deflecting. For the first time, something real passed between them. Not forgiveness, but recognition. The for sale sign came down on a Wednesday. By Friday, Lucinda Hart no longer lived at 114 Shoreline Drive. The home that had held echoes of laughter, betrayal, and justice now stood empty. Its rooms bare, the floors newly polished, as if scrubbing away the memories. She didn't leave in the dead of night. No secrecy, no shame, just quiet. A van took most of what she didn't give away: the faded armchair where she used to read the antique dishes that had survived 5 decades of dinners and disappointments, and the letters she kept from a husband long past. She didn't keep much, only her journals, a small tea kettle, and a hand-carved compass once gifted by Mason, who had pressed it into her hand with the words, "For whatever direction you choose." The rest she left for the fund. By the marina, a small boat rocked gently on the tide. White hull, blue trim, clean lines like hope untangled. She named it Resilient, not after a storm, but after what remained. Lucinda stood on the dock as a breeze rustled her silver hair. A backpack over one shoulder, her hands worn but steady. In front of her, the horizon stretched like a clean page, unwritten and unafraid. In her pocket was a sealed envelope, addressed to Monsieur Clay. Voiceover, Lucinda reading the letter intercut with scenes of her preparing the boat. Mason, I sold the house, the one with the porch swing you helped fix after that hurricane years ago. I gave half to the fund. The rest bought this boat, Resilient. The name felt right, not because I'm strong, but because I'm still here. I'm not angry at Eliza anymore. That doesn't mean I forget. Forgiveness, as you once said, isn't a gift for the other person. It's a choice we make so we don't rot from the inside. So I've chosen, but I don't forget. Forgetting would mean pretending the knife never cut. And I carry that scar, not as a wound, but as proof that I can heal. I don't know where I'm headed yet. Maybe Alaska, maybe just the edge of this map. But I'll write when I land. Or maybe I won't. Maybe that's the point. Maybe peace doesn't always send postcards. If you ever miss the sound of my voice, check the drawer under your shortwave radio. There's a tape. You'll know when to play it. Take care of the garden, and don't let the tomatoes overwater again. L. The engine hummed softly as she untied the moorings. She moved like someone who had rehearsed this not in action but in dream. Her eyes were clear, her shoulders upright, not with defiance but with release. As Resilient drifted from the dock, the golden edge of evening poured itself across the water. The sun sinking low wrapped her in a halo of fire and farewell. Slow motion. Lucinda turned the tiller gently. The sails caught the wind. Behind her, the town she'd lived in for 40 years grew smaller, quieter, swallowed by distance. Ahead, water sky horizon. No more names to protect. No more papers to sign. Just the tide. And time. The screen fades to black. Then a slow fade in gentle waves brushing against the hull of resilient golden light, stretched across the sea like memory that refuses to drown. Lucinda's voice enters soft but unmistakably clear, with the quiet weight of someone who has carried a truth too long and finally set it down. Voiceover. There are losses that don't heal, wounds that time doesn't soothe, and names we never imagined would betray us. But there's also peace. Peace that only comes when you stop pretending silence is noble. Cut to a close-up of her hand on the wheel of the boat, wind in her face, eyes forward, not smiling but full, present, awake. Voiceover. I used to think I was just an old woman, just a line on a page, just a name at the bottom of a form. But names have weight, and I I was the last name, the final one they didn't expect to fight back. A cut to a slow montage images not of Lucinda but of others. An elderly man in a nursing home, his hands trembling as he signs a bank form he doesn't understand. A grandmother on the phone, confused and frightened, asking about a credit card she never opened. A courtroom empty and echoing sunlight pouring in through high windows. Voiceover. I wasn't the only one. Not by far. There are thousands of us. People too tired to argue, too polite to suspect, too trusting to think family could steal everything and call it love. Lucinda pauses. The boat moves across the horizon, now her figure silhouetted. Voiceover. But even if they take your home, your money, your sense of safety, there's one thing they can't erase. Fade into black screen. Voiceover. Truth. A final beat. Then Lucinda says the line like a quiet vow to the tide. I am the last name. Not for what I owned, but for what I refused to forget. The screen goes fully black. Silence. Then slowly, starkly in white letters, based on true events. Each year, thousands of elderly people are financially exploited by family members and trusted caregivers. Most never come forward. Justice begins when silence ends. Fade to the final card. If you or someone you know may be a victim, reach out to the Elder Justice Initiative or your local support services. You are not alone. Fade out.